You gotta fish for the lost. Everywhere you go, you gotta fish for the lost. Everywhere you go, you gotta fish for the lost. Everywhere you go, on the street at your home, when you're walking all alone, in the highway.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. This is Jeremy Butt, and this is another episode of Fishing Report. I had the idea a while back to do something in the YouTube world that would be related to evangelism and to share some success stories about how the fish are biting. You know, we like to do that from time to time with actual fishing trips and what kind of conditions are on the lakes and rivers and things of that nature. You'll see those from time to time in magazines and on television. And I thought, why not apply the same principles with the world of evangelism and sharing the good news of Jesus Christ? And so the inaugural episode had Chris Holly from Tallahassee, Florida on a few weeks ago. And I am delighted to be joined by my good friend and brother Matt Wallin with House to House, Heart to Heart. Matt, how in the world are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm great, brother. How about you?
I am fantastic. Thank you for asking. I'm so glad that you could join us today. And so I wanted to take just a moment and give you the floor and let you share anything about you that we might want to or need to know.
Okay. Well, my name is Matt Wallin, and I have worked with House to House, Heart to Heart for almost 20 years now. And it'll be 20 years January 2nd of next year. And my dad was a first generation Christian. My mom had a little bit deeper history in the church. Her grandparents wrote their own Bible study, kind of like a open Bible study or Fishers and Men or Back to the Bible or something like that. So that's kind of in my DNA a little bit. A preacher once told the congregation if my grandmother could get enough rental houses, she would convert all of Rome. And so when somebody rented from her, she would always have a Bible study with them. So I didn't really find out about some of that till later in life, but I guess it's in my DNA. And I remember kind of my own evangelistic journey. I just started reading Acts as a teenager and being like, hey, we're not doing some of this. We ask other people to do the parts they're not doing. We're not doing some of this either. And that's been kind of a formative journey for me till today is trying to live out Acts, all of it, not just part of it. And I'm a deacon at the Oak Hill Church of Christ in Rome, Georgia. Married to Ashley Wallin. She was Ashley Warren, and she went to Oak Hill. We met when we were teenagers. Didn't really spend a lot of time together, but reconnected as adults. And we have been married about 18 years. And we moved back to Rome when we found out we were having twins. She said, I'm going home to get help with these kids. If you want to come, you can join me. And I decided to do so. And now we have three daughters, twins that are 10 and a 6-year old, all three girls. And we flip some houses, have a little firework business, work with the college students here. I work full time at House to House, and that is my life right now. And it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And if y'all will notice out in the world of YouTube, if you're watching, whether it's later on down the line or whatever it might be, you'll notice that he did not name his twins Romulus and Remus.
Right.
It's, I
Should have
told
thought
I,
about it. It was
I
on the
told
short list.
I told Matt sometime back, maybe when we first started talking and communicating, developing a relationship there. I think the only time I had been through Rome, Georgia, was one time when Diana and I were headed to Dahlonega, Georgia, where we spent our honeymoon. We were headed back for our first anniversary, and that was the day there was a horrible crash, and it's like a 75 car pile up or whatever
Wow.
it was on I-75 coming out of Chattanooga headed toward Atlanta. And so my father-in-law had given us word right before we walked out the door that morning about what had happened. So we had to end up taking an alternate route, and I think we ended up going through Scottsboro, Alabama, coming out of Huntsville, and then eventually winding over to Rome, Georgia, and then en route to
Nice.
Dahlonega. So that was an interesting venture, but that's the only time I have ever driven through Rome, Georgia.
Well, we've
So,
missed you. Come back anytime.
oh, they come back anytime. Well, Matt, we're happy that you're with us today. We appreciate all that you do for the kingdom. And again, for anybody who is seeing Matt's face, if he looks familiar, if you've been to any of the Bible lectureships, Connect conferences, or whatever, you've probably crossed paths with him as he's been set up in the house to house, heart to heart booth. And so several of you are going to recognize him. And so we're excited that he's on with us today. I was swapping some or comparing some notes with Matt before we started recording. I told Matt I would like him to talk about some of the more memorable conversion stories or evangelism stories. And I told him it didn't even have to relate to house, heart, heart, but it may very well do that. So at this time, Matt, I'm going to give you the floor and go ahead and lay some of that on us of some of the conversion stories from evangelistic efforts that stick out the most to you right now.
Yeah, man. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. Don't you love when somebody shares their conversion story? I like to eat those
Absolutely.
things up. I spoke at Ella J at a men's day they had this past Saturday, and I talked about evangelism, and I told a story about Mid McKnight. And I didn't plan this, but I forgot the book's right here. There's this little book that he wrote. It's very small, but in it he says that he and his wife would have 1,000 people a year in their home. And to me, that's too many. And but zero is too few. So somewhere in between. And when I was talking about Mid McKnight, an older guy came up to me and started crying at the end. And he said that Mid McKnight worked on his dad for years and never got him and died. But then his dad remembered, and a couple of years after that, became a Christian, converted his mom, and then he was already born at that point. He eventually became a Christian himself, and it's all because of the guy that wrote this little book. So he knows of which he speaks, you know. But that was a cool experience. But I love people's conversion stories, you know. And if you really care when they tell you, there's like a bond that's made. So yeah, conversion stories are important. I think that's why Acts is filled with them. Because we need to know those. But yeah, I mean, man, I have hours worth professionally and minutes worth, maybe a little more personally. But I've tried to really dedicate my life to that, both personally and professionally. And so I have a lot of good ones. Personally, I think my journey started, I was telling you, when I just started reading the book of Acts and taking some of those things serious. And I noticed that a lot of churches were having conversions reported on Sundays. But I noticed when I read in Acts that they were having conversions reported daily.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started looking at what are we doing different than what they did. And a lot of it was the same, but we weren't together as much, and we weren't as giving, and we weren't as evangelistic. We weren't talking about the gospel. And so, like, if we rewrote Acts, 247 might say, and the Lord added to the church on Sundays those that were being saved. And I was like, okay, if we're going to have daily conversions, we got to be together daily, and really started that. But I still didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, I'm just going to do what Acts says, and I'm going to become like a social butterfly, but not for the sake of just fun, but trying to be together as the church, you know. When I was at Jacksonville, I was still feeling that way. I was okay, but I took a Fishers and Men class. Have you ever taken that?
I have. I had Ron Maynard for that.
Me too.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
he passed like last year, I think.
Yes, I am aware of that. I miss Brother
Yeah.
Ron.
Yeah. Yeah. So he taught us that. And in some ways, there's nothing spectacular about it, but it's just the process of going through it and having a plan. Now, that's a long plan because it's 6 studies until you get to baptism,
Correct.
which, of course, we don't want to shortchange that. But my point is, some people are not 6 studies away, they're two. You make a mistake when you take a 300 study person and you try to cram them into a 3 part study. But you can also make a mistake when you take somebody who's 1 study away and try to cram them into, we're going to do Fishers and Men and Joel Miller back to back or something, you know? So, anyway, but what I loved about Fishers and Men is it gave me a plan. And then number two, it gives you homework. You have to go find somebody and ask them to do this. So, I had a guy I had met playing basketball and he was coming to church. He'd been coming for a couple of years, but we couldn't really get to those deep conversations. He kind of kept it a little bit like
Mm-hmm.
that. So with the homework, I went to him and said, "Hey, I'm taking this class. I have homework. Would you help me?" Well, this, of course, who's going to say no? You're my friend. I won't help you. So I said, "I need to practice this Bible study on you." So about 3 or 4 studies in, you could see a demeanor change of, oh, you know, like I'm not. helping you anymore as much as like I'm learning. And so at that last study, when he realized he needed to what he needed to do, and see, he had already he one thing he said is, does that mean everything I've believed and thought and taught and done is wrong up to this point and a waste, you know? I'm like, no, because you love the Lord and you're a very moral person. You just have one thing that's lacking. You haven't been baptized for the remission of your sins. And so he did that. And so that moment when you convert, and I'd baptized a few people before, but it was almost like a ready-made situation. Or maybe I was filling in preaching and someone wanted to become a Christian. But this is the first person I'd gone from like contact to prospecting to building a relationship, having in my home, studying, and then baptizing. And so that for me was like eye-opening of, okay, I can do this. And that really started this journey of we're not paid professionals. We're not experts. That's not the model. It's the leadership equips the members for the work of ministry. And I really started taking it personal of I cannot outsource my evangelism. If I want people to become Christians, I'm the only way they're going to do that. God has done the heavy lifting, the work, the plan, the message, but he needs somebody, that's his plan, to teach other people. And my preacher's not going to do it for a very myriad of reasons, I guess, you know. So that conversion, and he's still faithful today. He has, since his wife has become a Christian, and he goes to Peru with the Hoover Church of Christ every year on a mission trip. He's fluent in Spanish, and so he is one of their translators and teachers. And so seeing him staying faithful too has just been so encouraging, you know. So that's one of my favorite stories. About 5 years ago, my coworker Rod, I work from home and he works from my home. He works right over there. He became a Christian. He was in Dahlonega actually and converted in their college ministry. And he had this thriving college group with this great college minister for 2 days because he was baptized and then COVID shut his school down. And so Colt Mahana called me and said, hey, I'm sending this new Christian back to you. I really need you to disciple him and mentor him. And I said, yeah, I totally know how to do that. But just in case I have absolutely no idea, Colt, what do you recommend? And so those conversations set me on a journey of more discipling and mentoring and being in someone's life than I'd ever been on. And so Rod comes back and I asked Colt, what do you guys do? And he said, we have this men's accountability group. It meets every Tuesday night, and we talk about parts of scripture that you can't talk about around women, or you can't talk about around people that are not ready for that yet, and it wouldn't be appropriate. And so confession, like we're told to confess our faults to one another. How do we usually keep that commandment, Jeremy? Confess our faults to one another. How do you usually see that kept?
Well, if you're talking about just coming forward and asking for prayers and being kind of generic, I mean, that's probably the first thing that comes to mind.
It's usually come forward on Sunday, which how often does that happen? 5 times a year, maybe,
Yeah.
or not at all. Okay, well, that's a problem. Anytime there's a command in the Bible that we don't keep, it's a problem. And so this group became a way to keep commandments like that. Bear one another's burdens. I cannot do that if I don't know you. And you know, you and I are friends, but we don't talk enough that I could probably bear your burdens. Like you're free to call me at any time, and you have, but we don't talk every day. But do you have anybody you talk to every day? And so that's kind of what we were figuring out is we needed that and we didn't have it. No wonder we weren't growing both personally and as a congregation. And so when Rod came home, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna start a men's accountability group. We're gonna meet in my home, and we met every Tuesday night for about 3.5 years. And I've got me and this new guy I haven't met yet meeting in my basement. Boy, that sounds creepy. Is he gonna want to come to that? And so I looked around the congregation and I found guys who I thought had kind of hit a ceiling for some reason. Maybe it's lack of training, maybe it's hidden sin in their life. And we invited them. And so we ended up the first rotation we had about 7 guys. And now we're 5 years into the men's group. We're on our fourth rotation of it. We've had 2 guys who have become associate ministers, one here in Rome and one in Tampa, Florida. We have 2 guys that are taking Georgia School of Preaching classes. We have 3 guys that have become Christians. And one of the things I'm most excited about is we've had 4 guys baptize their first person, which is how I really think you're kind of getting on to something, you know,
Amazing.
disciples making disciples and
Mhm.
making disciples, you know. So these guys now know they have a plan. They know how to study with someone. They know how to play the long game. They know how to actually genuinely care. They know how to get them to the point of baptism. Then they do it and they know to stay in their life. And so Rod's conversion 5 years ago really changed my life. It gave me kind of the tools, a men's group, It gave me a mentor, like a Timothy just fell into my lap, a Barnabas fell into my lap. And the effect I've had the past 5 years, I was going to have some of that. I was on a journey for that and I was trying, but this has really helped me. It was like the missing piece is his friendship. And so it's no wonder Jesus sent them out two by two. So I think sometimes a mistake people make is they try to do things on their own. And well, no offense, no matter how great you are, you weren't really built for that. That's not a good, successful long-term plan. Um, and so Rod and I built the men's group up, and now he leads it. I was leading it with his help. Now he leads it with one of our success stories help. And I don't even go. So about the past year and a half, I don't go. I've switched my focus to the college group. We had 4 or 5 students, and Rod asked if he could start teaching a class for him, and he did. Then he moved and lived in Israel for a while and handed that over to me. And we've grown from 4 or 5 to about 45. And so we actually have 83 in the group me. And if everybody came to something, we'd have well between 50 and 60. But they're college students. So some of them go home or a lot of them are on sports teams. But it's not uncommon for us to have anywhere between 30 and 40 every Sunday morning. And the thing I've learned, the way we've gotten there is we're together. We have Sunday morning Bible class. We have Sunday morning worship, afternoon service. We have a Monday night devotional. Tuesday morning, we have breakfast club and we have a men's group. Wednesday night, we have services. And on Friday nights, the students started this on their own. They get together and just read the Bible. And so you got about 7 guys. They started about a year ago and they just finished Leviticus. And the girls have split off from that and started meeting and they're studying Proverbs. And so the reason our group is growing is because we're together all the time. And the second part that's just as important as building relationships and community is we are in deep Bible study. Like I only get a couple of people that I'll allow to teach the group. That might be too strong a word, allow, but there's only a couple of people I'll let teach the group because if you're not putting 5 to 10 hours worth of study into your lesson, you're not qualified to teach the group. Now, I'll tell you, that becomes challenging when you're teaching 3 times a week and you're not on staff because like my full-time job is house to house. And I do cut into it a little bit with the college work and phone calls and people coming by and studying, but I can't do that very much. And I only do that a little bit because I'm a workaholic and I have a bank of thousands of hours, I think, built up, but it's challenging when you're teaching so much. But hey, I'm gonna mute something real quick that's kind of loud. Can I be right back?
Sure, sure. Mute away, my brother. Matthew is muted. That can't be
All right, sorry about that. That's
disputed.
the downside of working from home and working in a basement. HVAC kicked on and it was noisy.
No
But,
worries, no worries. I love hearing about all the togetherness. That's a great component because even as you talked about the importance of doing things with other people and how that's better than us doing things on our own, I had the thought so many times when we try to do things uh, by self, it ends up on a shelf. Because
yeah.
we stop at some point. And so it's great to have other people around us. I think those are some great things that you're sharing as we think about the emphasis on evangelism and what results you've had in the Rome area down there. I think that's wonderful. We were talking earlier about what some of the latest tools are that are out through house to house, heart to heart now. You have a couple of those that you want to highlight real quick?
Yeah, man, that'd be great. So Uh, I try not to be a walking commercial for house to house. And if it didn't work that well, I wouldn't talk about it very much. I would just do my job and be thankful for the little results we have and try to improve it. But the fact is, we had 5 conversions a day reported back last year in this country from the tools that we offer. So that's between the School of Evangelism, training churches to teach, from the mail outs, from our staff members studying with people, from our social media accounts and Zoom studies that we've had, door knocking day. And so we limit that just to this country, and we limit that to those that are reported back. So you think about if 5 a day were reported back, how many more actually happened? So you said a line earlier that I think is just so good. The fish are biting.
Mm-hmm.
100% true. I've talked to in the past, and I probably talked to 20 churches a week, I would say at least on average. And I hear this every day is, man, people in this age group 30 and down are really open to the truth. everybody in the country that's out working amongst that age group is saying that. And it's not just that age group, but it's a lot of different age groups, but that is one that is for sure. See, they're not beholden to anything necessarily. Maybe their grandparents were, their parents kind of went, they haven't. And a lot of them have seen the craziness of the world, and scripture makes sense to them. So that's why we're able to, at Oak Hill, like Wednesday night, we had question and answer. And I prepared two questions, but one of them took a while because I'm long-winded, as you can see. And it had been an hour, and we only got to one. And so I'd ask the students, hey, you guys can go home, we can just hang out, whatever, or we can do the second question. And every student wanted to stay. So Bible class on Wednesday night was over 2 hours, and everybody loved it, right? So they're looking for anybody that's like, well, this generation doesn't want the truth or what. You're not really trying. You're not forming a relationship to where they feel comfortable because they cannot get enough of deep Bible study. But so I hear that from churches around the country, but that's kind of been the response from the house to house work as well. Every single day I get a text, an email, a Facebook message about somebody who was reached through the work that we're providing. And that's not even counting World Video Bible School, World Bible School, Apologetics Press, podcasts like this one, people who are personally evangelistic. And so that should just tell you if our small corner of the world is seeing results like that, what's actually going on. But yeah, so a few of the things we've done about 3 years ago, we went from every other month mailings to monthly. And that has been a huge part of it. We'll tell churches all the time, yeah, if you want to do a one-time 10,000 mailing, you can, but it'd be much better to do monthly to the minimum of 1,000 people. Just reach them over and over. And so the churches that were in when we first started are still, a lot of them are every other month because that's what they're used to. But all the new churches that are coming in are monthly, and that is a huge part of the results. Is because people need to be reached about 10 times, according to direct mail studies, to be reached. And so if you reach even a small group over and over and over, that's where success is coming from. We also started a new movers program, which is great.
Yep.
It will target people that have just moved into the community. And so you can mail to house to a small area or to a large area, but new movers is flexible. You can go to a small area or a large area, and it targets just those new families. And what we'll do is we'll give you not only their address, but their first and last name. And then about 2 weeks after you get that list, we're going to send them a customized copy of House to House. And 2 weeks after that, they'll get a postcard. So if you will go visit them, you'll have 3 touches with them in the first month that they've been there. And not everybody that's on it always turns out to be a new mover. Occasionally, somebody has moved in with a relative and it has flagged that, but they're not. But it's like 80 to 90% accurate is kind of what the reports we have seen. And so even if you know going in that may be the case, you can say, well, I'm glad this worked out then because I had never met you. And now we've met you and we have you this gift basket too. Then we also will provide a website for free for any church that doesn't have one. And so we have partnered, we've been doing it for a while and they were good, but we've been partnering with Tim Yeager at World Bible School, and now they've gotten a huge upgrade. And so if you do house to house, even one time a year, you can do monthly new movers, you can do the website for free. And so our basic model that looks great and is at the top of Google. And then if you want something more robust, Tim can help you do that. You can do that with him as well. But then we also are providing digital issues, and we're providing them in a way that can be shared through WhatsApp or on social media. So we're encouraging churches, hey, when you get this email saying, here's your issue for the month, just put it up. So like the first of every month, you're able to put that on social media and have some of those engagements. And we've created some social media stuff. Like we're on Instagram. We have one kind of for the lost almost, and then we have a House to House School of Evangelism Instagram account that has things like this, conversations like this, tips from soul winners. So I encourage people to go follow that. You can see our content where we talk about the thief on the cross or baptism for the remission of sins or the oneness of the church and share that stuff. But then you can also see tips that are just for us on how to use some of those tools. And then our School of Evangelism, it will go to places and help train the saved to teach the lost. A lot of times people can't go to PTP, they can't go to Freed Hardeman, they can't go to Connect. So we'll bring our school to them. And
is that Rob Whitaker's thing that he does?
Yeah, and it's been great because we have probably 20 churches that have doubled, and a few of them have tripled in size since we came in. And it's, I have a thick stack of books. It's like Go Ye means Go Me, or You Can March for the Master, or House to House by Ivan Stewart, which is a great name, I think.
Yes,
And all
yes.
these books from the 60s when the church was really growing, the amazing thing is those things still work. And it's just based on genuinely caring and sharing the gospel. So visitation programs, card programs, door knocking, widowhood workshops, like Dean Miller talks about. Any of these things can work. And really, sometimes people will say, oh, well, this doesn't work or that doesn't work. Usually, they can fill up a list of things that don't work, and then their list of things that do work is blank. And so, one thing I say is like, really, the only thing that doesn't work is not working. If you'll find something and get good at it, that will work. Yeah, and we had one church, Shelbyville Road in Indianapolis. Do you know them? You
I
know
do
Ben
not.
Vick or anybody up there? But they had like I think it was like 8 conversions with the mailings last year of house to
Wow.
house. And so not every church has 8. Almost every church will get at least some visitors. But that's just one example of one congregation who has seen great results from the mailing just in one year. And one thing we've tried to do too, Jeremy, is become more personally accountable to being evangelistic.
Hmm.
We've always been that way to an extent, but like I have no right to tell you about, hey, you should try house to house to reach people if I'm also not personally reaching people. And so I think that's one of the best things we've done in the past 5 years is all of our men are engaged in Bible studies with people fairly regularly. We have study number 3 with one of the college students that was here earlier and a friend of his tonight. So I'm very hopeful that we'll have a baptism tonight. And it really informs how you're able to talk to people about evangelism when you're, out in the streets trying to be with the people and reach them and that kind of thing. So I think everything that we're doing is run through the lens of this isn't in theory something you should try. This is being field tested by us on a daily basis. And we know that it works because we see it, if that makes sense.
That's right. It's put into practice, and that is a great thing. And actually, I'd like to even piggyback off of what you said earlier about the importance of having the young adults involved. And of course, we've got the new movers program in place here, and we're trying better to figure out some ways to implement that. Probably in more efficient ways, but our young adults meet here on Tuesday nights, and they've got a real deep study that they're involved in and time together. But think they're actually wanting to get involved with that new movers program, and so we're trying to set some things up there because they're a group of go-getters, and they really want to get some things done for the Lord. And so I could tie both of those things together with some of what you've just talked about. And I think that is great. House to House, Heart to Heart is doing some amazing things for the Lord. And as we will talk about some different tips and tactics and tools that are available at times, House to House, Heart to Heart is one of those. And I'm so glad that we could have Matt Wallin on here today to go over some of those things with us. As you've heard from his own mouth, some of the great things that he's involved in, House to House, Heart to Heart, are doing. And so, Matt, do you have anything else before we close here in just a few moments?
Yeah, I would just give this piece of advice. It's really hard to be a soul winner if you don't know any. It may be impossible. And I know the scripture is enough. It gives us everything that we need. But like you think about 2 Corinthians 7:6, it says, God who comforts the downcast comforted me by the sending of Titus. So sometimes the way that God does the thing is to send someone else. And so I think the way that God makes us evangelists is, yes, of course, the scriptures, there's no substitute for that, but by pairing us up with someone. Chris Donovan, he's at the Kensington Woods Church of Christ in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and they're really growing. And one thing he said is the passenger seat in his car is as important as the driver's seat. And the point is, you take somebody somewhere to do it with you. You think about if you can get those young adults involved in new movers, they've got 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 years of doing that. Whereas if we get someone who's 60, 70, 80, great, that's good. But how much longer do they have to put that to refine that? See, because part of the reason you get good at Bible studies is by messing some up. I think all good soul winners have, man, I handled this poorly, you know?
I have my own share of those stories.
And there's no shortcut. I don't think you get good at it without messing up, just like sports or something. But I would say seek out a soul winner. And if you ask your preacher, who has converted the most people here? And spend time with them. And if that's not very helpful, ask him, hey, who's somebody in the area that you know? Surely in Columbia, Tennessee, there's no shortage of soul winners. So maybe there's not one across the pew or across the auditorium, but there's one in the city somewhere. And then you just go to lectureships and you hear people talk about evangelism, and not to challenge them and be mean, but hey, I want to know like some studies that you've been in lately. And sometimes they're just talking theory. And hey, look, we can't be experts on everything we talk about, the whole counsel of God, right? But find those who are soul winners and just get to know them, spend time with them. I talk to at least one or two soul winners every week, and it really holds me accountable. I'm in a group text with a few. And if I'm not sending a picture of like or of a study or a prayer request, I stand out because they are. And so I think being in that kind of a company can help you. If you want to be broke, hang out with broke people. If you want to be rich, hang out with rich people. If you want to be a soul winner, you got to know some. Um, and
Where
so
there's a
if any
will,
of this
there's
kind
a
of stuff,
way.
yeah, and if any of this appeals, feel free to reach out to me. Maybe you want some more material, you would like to hear some lessons on evangelism, you would like to know more about the deep Bible study program that we have for the college students, or if you're just looking for a mentor or a partner, I know some soul winners who would love to talk with you. Just email me, Matt, M-A-T-T, at housetohouse.com, and I can kind of help pair you up with some of that.
Well, Matt, we appreciate your time this morning. We'll here in just a moment. We'll end this, and after I'm done recording, we can still talk off of the segment for just a moment before I let you go. But as we're talking about this concept of a fishing report and as it relates to evangelism, my dad, Foster Butt, always used to say, "You have to keep your line in the water." So let that sink in from the aspect of evangelism, and we will let that be our closing line today. Matt, I appreciate you being with us, and we wish you the best today on your efforts. And as we tell everybody bye in the world of YouTube, remember to tune in. We'll have some upcoming segments on Fishing Report where we'll interview some other evangelists and let them talk about what's going on with their efforts to reach people with the gospel. Matt, we appreciate it, my brother.
Thank you, Jeremy.